Family Business Show, and I'm joining you today from the wonderful offices of 101 Business Radio, having a great day here. It's lovely and cold outside, so I've got my jacket on, and this is the third part of the If You Were Hit By A Bus booklet that I've put out. The Hit By A Bus booklet is really a checklist, a to-do list, a list of questions, some questions that you really need to address and be aware of. Ask the questions within your family, at work, because they all are appropriate questions that should be answered, and you should really have some idea of these answers anyhow. We started off with a question about who should go into the business if the owner was hit by a bus, and then the second question was who would go into the business and open the business if the owner was hit by a bus, and if they're not the same person, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to change to make sure it happens in such a way that the right person does open the doors? We've talked about other things. We've talked about keys and locks and things that can be misplaced. We've talked about some of the documentation that you might need and where that might sit, legal documents, guarantees and the like. So what would happen if the owner was hit by a bus or the leader of the family business was hit by a bus? Where would the guarantees be kept? Who would know where they are? And what would need to be done with those guarantees? It goes on to a lot of other questions. I live with questions, and the questions being asked need to be asked from an unemotional place, so that we're not really in turmoil when the emotion of an accident, tragic accident, can happen. And in the cases of these conversations in an unemotional place, unemotional conversations around a dinner table or with a lawyer, we can actually think much more clearly about the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. There are two things that can happen, or there's a number of things that can happen if somebody was hit by a bus, but generally you can either die or you can live. If you die, you're going to need to have a will. Most people should have a will because of what they possess, what they own, and that will give direction to those people, the executors that are left behind, to do the wishes and put in place the actions that need to take place if someone was to pass. But if you don't die, if you're actually incapacitated, you can't think for yourself, which is not a nice place to be, a power of attorney needs to be in place so that if you get hit and you don't die, there are some directions legally structured that will allow other people to do the work for you that you want to have happen. And that can be looking after you, for number one. It can be how we have access to bank accounts. It can be how the business is going to be run and how the family works. So if you've got children, there can be decisions made on which aligns with a will, where who might look after your children should something happen to you. So there are so many different things that come up in questions for your accountant. I mean, how are the documents put together? How often do we do them? What is our tax position? From a legal point of view, some of the questions that you might be asking is, okay, if we've got a will, what does that mean? Who's affected by it? Do other members of the family, because I've got a will, do they need to have a will now? If there's high wealth in the family and mum and dad have wills and they die, sure, I might end up with a whole lot of stuff, but if I've got siblings, how do we separate all of that stuff? It could be a house, it could be a holiday house, it could be cash, it could be shares. How do we distribute those sorts of things? And unless you do that from an unemotional place, it can be challenging because emotions can get in the way, and unfortunately greed, that can surface very quickly in these instances. There are a number of families who have been in business over the years. You can read about them in the papers where the family founder dies and litigation occurs even though there is a will. And it is up to the executors then to process, to work through, work with family members as to what the outcomes will be. In Perth, in Western Australia recently, there is a very high net worth family. The owner and founder of the business has passed away, and so many family members have put claims in to contest the will that now it appears that the family business is going to be broken up and sold. So something that was created that was really quite representative of an entrepreneurial mindset in Western Australia will be changed for good, will be broken up and sold to the highest bidder. All of the family members that have been affected by this, they will have their own points of view, and they will be very different, obviously, from each other's points of view, because they've made approaches through a legal process. Maybe if there had been a lot more conversation within the family well before the passing of the founder of the business, outcomes would have been different. I think really the hardest part is to have these conversations with family. Sometimes the older generation just finds it really hard to be open and honest about what they have accumulated. And more often than not, the younger generation today appears to have, I want it now, perspectives that come through. And the older generation are challenged by the change in culture and the difference in values that the younger generation can have picked up from their friends and other family. So why not have the conversation? If there is somebody who is in control, lead the conversation. But if we don't know what we're talking about, too many times stuff, and I use the term very loosely, stuff comes up that, oh, I didn't know he or she owned that, and oh, I didn't know they controlled this or the other, and well, where does that go? Or it might even come down to the smallest item in mum or dad's home, and 2 or 3 siblings can want one little piece of china or one little glass memento, and that will start an argument that can really grow in size to have a full-on family dispute and family members not talk to each other for years. Just having a conversation about values in your family is a critically important part of life. And even if you have that conversation every 2 or 3 years, just to review, are these the values that we really want to live with? And what effect, if children are getting married and they're marrying people of different culture, what effect is that changing our family culture? How does that affect us? How does that make a difference to the way we think, where children will think slightly different to the parents? It's quite amazing how these changes happen. We don't notice them because they're very gradual. So if we have the opportunity to have these conversations, and sometimes it's not a matter of having the opportunity, it's making the time available, that we will achieve some outcomes that will resolve and keep a family harmony, or in a harmonious fashion. I keep saying if I've seen one family business, I've only ever seen one family business. I keep seeing differences all the time. Even when families have had difficult issues to face and there is a resolution, or there appears to be a resolution, there's always 1 or 2 little things that we seem to stick to. These are the emotional pangs, and if we live in the past, those emotions will drive us. So somewhere along the line we need to be able to let go of these painful historical things that will happen. I'm not saying they might happen, I'm saying they will happen, because somewhere along the line we are going to have a disagreement. It might be only a small one, but if it's got an emotional push to it, a button that you can feel you're being pressed with, then it's actually more than that. So you're going to have to pick a time in your own mind to let go. So I suppose in finishing this up, if you don't have a will, get a will. If you haven't got a power of attorney, get a power of attorney. And a power of attorney is, from a legal point of view, of a lot of documentation and a lot of things you want to have happen. But if you're incapacitated, you're going to need a medical power of attorney as well. Especially in Australia, you need to have it signed off with a doctor so that you can actually take control of somebody's life and look after them. On that note, have a great day, and the Family Business Show will continue, and I look forward to spending more time on 101 Business Radio. Have a great day. Lastly, you can contact me on john@johnbroons.com. Come to my website. Thank you.